Hello and welcome to our new podcast, Leap Listens. I'm Sarah McGregor.
And I'm Roger Kalis.
This is really exciting, isn't it, Roger? We've been talking about this for a long time now.
We have been talking about it for a long time, and it's great to finally be in front of the microphone.
Yeah, so in our day-to-day lives of employer branding and recruitment marketing, we're really lucky to meet and work with some really talented and interesting people. So we just wanted to share the discussion.
Absolutely, and just so people know what to expect from this podcast, it's going to be short, just 15 minutes long is what we're aiming for, and it will be a combination of conversation between the two of us sometimes, and other times we've got some expert special guests along to add their insight.
Yep, and we've got a few people lined up already, so that's really exciting. Okay, let's go. So, Roger, you recently wrote an article where you said it was a great time to be a creative in employer branding. So this is what we're talking about today.
I did, yeah, and I wrote it because I believe it. The main thrust of that article was about the fact that when I kind of started my career in recruitment marketing, or what was it called back then? It was kind of rec ad, I suppose. It was a little bit of a niche, and I suppose people would ask you what you did for a living, and you'd say you worked in advertising, and I guess they'd have all sorts of preconceptions about what that meant, and then you'd kind of find yourself gradually trying to explain that it wasn't really products you were advertising, it was people's careers, and then you'd give examples of the army or the police, and you kind of feel like you're apologising for what you did. But that's all changed really now. It's become much more of a mainstream thing, because I think the way that organisations are treating their employees and what people's perception of their products and services are now just much more intertwined, and you can't really uncouple those two things. So that's why I was saying, I guess, as a creative, some of the challenges that we're facing now are genuinely exciting advertising challenges.
Yeah. And, recruiting talent has become harder than ever, hasn't it? And, that's where your employer brand then becomes your weapon.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think, as you say, we'll hear about this, the war on talent, and it, absolutely, you need these differentiators. And I suppose what people are increasingly finding is that they want to work with an organisation that shares their values, I guess. Not entirely true in all instances, but certainly it is true to say that people kind of want to work for somewhere where they feel like it's aligned with them, not just necessarily to take a paycheck. So your employer brand is a way of obviously conveying those messages.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are going to be a lot of organisations that don't have a lot of brand equity, and now they're going to have to really think about their employer brand and make a start from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been an interesting one, because again, coming back to that sort of what you're advertising thing, we were doing advertising, say, for Nike, and I think I wrote in the article that while the Above the Line agency was doing a kind of cool World Cup act, we were sort of advertising for their accountants. But now it's just become much more important, and where you've got those organisations, like say, where they don't have this big public facing brand that people already associate lots of values with, or they want to work for because it's aspirational, it's just become much more important for organisations to put their employer brand out there when they don't have that public face, that people don't have those assumptions about what it's like to work for them already, and people are going looking for that, and I suppose they're finding either people that work for the organisation, what they're saying about it, or the information that the organisations are putting out themselves.
And I think coming out of the pandemic as well, and for employees working from home or hybrid working, it's harder for companies to cultivate that culture. And it's an opportunity, I guess, for organisations now to rip up their culture and start again. And I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach isn't, it's not going to cut the mustard now, is it?
No. I mean, yes, rip up your culture, everyone. I suppose it depends, like, where you came from, doesn't it? What you were doing before, what your organisation, it depends on your organisation. I suppose it's very contextualised, that. But I guess in the majority of cases where you're dealing with a service industry where people are using a computer for work, or working from an office, I guess it's just made people and organisations have to think really, really clearly about how they include that hybrid culture in the employer brand. Because, we know from the work that we do, where now that's what candidates are asking. They're asking, what's the situation around work? Can I work flexibly? Can I work from home? And I guess the challenge as we, often have this debate ourselves is, how do you create a culture when you aren't together physically sometimes? And we know organisations that have succeeded in that extremely well. But I guess that's because that's sort of where they came from. It's how you manage to do that where that's not been your norm.
Yeah, exactly. And I know when we first went into lockdown, we did, online teams, sort of socials, where we introduced a bit of bingo and all other types of like quizzes and games. And, everyone was sort of a bit quizzed out, weren't they? And it's kind of, those are sort of things we introduced originally to try and help with culture. But everyone sort of gets a bit fed up of that, don't they? You can't have can't have that false fun. And
that's it.
And it's trying to now introduce ideas and that sort of create that inclusivity post-pandemic.
Yeah, that's it. And like you say, in the early days, it was kind of enforced fun, wasn't it? And it was, I suppose there was that sort of Dunkirk spirit, element of how can we all sort of make sure that we're still having fun and maintaining a culture. But I think that definitely had a shelf life. Thinking about our organisation at Lee, I guess the thing that we did do was all the different business units got together on that regular weekly Zoom. And that's something that's persisted. That's something that has come out of it, which we now do, which has definitely brought us all closer together virtually, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, going back to your article that you wrote on LinkedIn, obviously you're a regular judge at the Recruitment Marketing Awards, and I saw a tweet yesterday that said how employer branding and recruitment marketing categories don't feature in advertising and marketing awards. And they felt it was the right time to introduce the category in mainstream awards. What are your thoughts on that, Rog?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And funny enough, like, awards are one of the things that made you feel more than ever like you were working in a niche in the past, because some of the categories were things like best use of colour and best use of a giraffe or something, and I guess you sort of really felt like this is quite a niche thing, and you'd get the celebrities would come along and present them, and some of these people would be proper A-listers, and you could tell they were slightly bemused and confused by what they're presenting. But now that you're seeing these big companies advertising about their employee experience, and they're not vocational jobs, we're talking about service industries and big tech companies, it's really becoming a lot more mainstream. So I do think definitely there's room for employer brand categories in mainstream awards, because, as I said, you kind of can't uncouple those two things now.
And I think also you talked about how HR used to sort of play that role at marketing, whereas HR functions now are much more broad and have so much more experience in employer experience and the candidate journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're now seeing is that HR was sort of personnel, and very much marketing was marketing. But now HR is this strategic function. It's about workforce planning. It's basically realising that people are the heart of the organisation and keeping them happy, making sure that you've got the right skills in the future. All of those HR and workforce planning issues are now falling in their remit, becoming much more of a strategic function. And with that, needs a more sophisticated approach to marketing messages. So although I'm not going to pretend that, it's all a completely happy union, and that marketing budgets are reflective of recruitment budgets, they're not, but it's much more the case now that you're listened to and it's taken seriously.
Yeah. And you just can't hide anymore, can you? And, social media, without a doubt, has played a lead role in that. And there's nothing more powerful, is there, than hearing your employees talk with passion about their employer and how they've been.
As long as you believe it. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is with all these things, it's do I believe what I'm listening to? So when you're having your employees speak on your behalf, you kind of can smell it if it's authentic or not. So that's quite good, because it sort of keeps organisations in check, if you like. It's whether they mean it or they don't, you kind of have to be what you say you are, much more than ever now, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Or another good tactic, have a really lucrative referral scheme.
Well, they do work, as we know. Yeah.
So how do companies that haven't invested in their brand previously approach now an employer branding
Oh, where to
campaign?
start? Well, I think it's something that has to start with some truth and some insight. So I guess the best place to start is with your values, but those have to be something that you actually mean and something that is real and something that resonates with employees. Because in the past, I think we've all seen values for organisations which are essentially the same, written in the boardroom, saying the kind of things that they feel like they should be saying. But then you've got other organisations. I think it was like the pork scratchings people, whose one of their values is "don't be a dick." And I thought, well, that's not going to be right for everyone. But you kind of believe that, and in a way, you can sort of live by that and use that as a guide when you're working there.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, but something that you're certainly reminding me
use
on a regular basis. But I think So I guess the place to start is really your values, but make those values real. Make sure that they do resonate with your organisation. Make sure they are connected to your overall why, and then from there, the best employer brands and the best employer brand campaigns tend to come out based on insight, really. And as we've learned as well now, everything is so much more measurable. So the kind of the big reveal of the creative idea, it still does exist, but these days, we need to prove what we do. We need to prove that it works. We need to show a return on investment. That's been true of a long time, but yeah. So start with your values and some truths about your organisation,
and then I guess it's leading then into encapsulating that into your creative and your brand.
Yeah, well, that's the magical bit, Sarah, that I can't possibly reveal because it's basically you get taught the secrets of the creative, and it's like the magic circle.
Right.
We can't share.
Okay, we won't talk about that then. Then from that, it's promoting everything consistently.
Absolutely, and I suppose that's consistency in terms of both the message that you're putting out there, but also how it looks. So in the noise of, what was it you were looking at something the other day? How many advertising messages that we're exposed to on a daily basis? 6,000
to 10,000.
Yeah, so if you're thinking that, and I think there's always that temptation as well, it's because you've done the work, it stands out to you, you recognise it, it's exciting because you've done it, but you have to just remember that your work exists in a sea of everyone else's work. So if you can be consistent in your messaging, in your look, then you've got more chance of building a brand, of having people recognise you and know who you are. And obviously the creative part is that bit where you're trying to hook people's eye, you're trying to pique their interest in a kind of sea of wallpapery ads.
Yeah. So we're coming up to our 15 minutes.
No, surely not.
We are.
But I could talk for so much longer. Yeah, I think I might be monologuing. This is why.
This is why, Roger. 15 minutes and no more. But I think there's a lot of topics that we've talked about and, just touch the surface. And I'd love to explore in more detail on future podcasts, employer value propositions, recruitment marketing strategies. But 15 minutes is it.
So just one final thing, Sarah. How does someone neatly end a podcast?
Yeah, we haven't really thought about that one. We're going to have to work on that. But until then...
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.